What is up, YouTube? Another week, and we got a new episode of Survivor, and you know I'm going to talk about it after I said I was going to in last week's episode. So here we are. Episode 6 was called I'm Not Batman, I'm the Canadian, and let's just jump in. This was a big episode, probably one of my favorite episodes that's happened in a while. And we start right after the vote from last episode, like usual. Where Bello voted out Brando, and Emily tries to make Kendra feel better or like console her. I think she's feeling some guilt, maybe because she knows what it's like to be on the outs, but ends up doing it in a weird way that I think ends up kind of like just adding insult to injury. So what Emily ends up saying is she's like, for what it's worth, we thought about telling you, but we decided we couldn't trust you, so we didn't because we thought it might get back to Brando. Which I don't know what that's supposed to do. That would not make me feel better or trusted or valued. Like I said, it really just kind of makes me, like, it gives insult to injury, I think, or at least it would make me feel shittier. But Kendra actually does a really solid job playing a poker face. Like, initially at Tribal, after the vote, she looked really emotional, a little flabbergasted, but by the time they got back to camp, she was pretty poker face. She was even saying, like, I just hope you guys know I'm still willing to work with you. And then in the aside, she's like, oh, I'm revenge right now for these guys. Like, absolutely not. I'm gunning for them. And I think she played that really well in terms of not reacting too sharply initially. I would actually even really like to see that revenge arc play out, even though that kind of puts a damper on some of the people whose games I actually really have enjoyed watching and hope make it far. But it's interesting to me even further because at one point Emily, who has been left out of most votes and been to almost, if not every tribal, says, you know, don't interpret the situation as you being on the bottom, which is kind of, I don't understand where that's coming from, because she has pretty much expressed in the last two tribals that she has specifically felt and identified that she was on the bottom because she was left out of votes and because, you know, she was the odd one out, you know? Like, she literally has taken this situation and said, like, even though this is exactly how I knew I was on the bottom, I don't want you to think you're on the bottom now. And I don't know if that's coming from a place of, like, I know how bad it feels to feel like you're on the bottom and, like, don't sweat it, or if it's coming from a place of, like, bringing the lamb to the vote, so to speak, in Survivor, you know? And ultimately, it just made me kind of think that, like, I feel like sometimes it might, and this has got to be hard to do. I don't even think I could do it. I can barely do it on a phone call. Unless I do it on purpose, because sometimes I do it on purpose with my sense of humor. It'll make sense in a second. I'm rambling. But anyway, sometimes it's better to say nothing and actually sit in that awkward silence of tribal or post-tribal camp life, I think. I don't really know that I can prove that, and it's certainly circumstantial. But this seems like one of those times to me where Emily would have been better off if she wouldn't have said anything, because I feel like I was on Kendra's side listening to her talk about this, because like it just rubbed me wrong, and I was like, yeah, Kendra, I see where you're coming from. So that was an interesting post-vote moment. After that, we shift over to Lulu, and they're currently engaging in like a tribe-wide idol search that was kind of spearheaded by Caleb, and his thought there was, if I can get the entire tribe to search together, my chances of knowing who has the idol goes way up, which is pretty smart. But also, if you find the idol, you have to share it with your tribe, more or less. It's very hard in a group search situation, or at least it has seemed very hard and proven difficult in the past for contestants to publicly search for the idol and keep it a secret when they find it from everyone. But I mean, it hasn't not been done before. So that's his plan. It's kind of going pretty well. Bruce ends up finding it, but it's a beware advantage. So Bruce officially loses his vote until he finds the idol. He reads the note out loud to everyone except for Couture, more or less. And it says the idol is underneath the center of their camp and you got to dig for it. So pretty much immediately they all kind of briskly jog slash sprint back to camp. Couture's out and about, just kind of gathering firewood and stuff, and they start digging like crazy. Looking for it, mainly Bruce digging, since it's his vote on the line, and he kind of found it. They seem to be honoring this whole like Bruce found the beware paper, so we'll let him find the idol. At least that's what it seems like to me. But then Couture walks up and is kind of like, oh, hey, what's going on? Everyone, literally everyone covers for Bruce, which was kind of interesting. It's like one of those moments where I feel like they all felt pressure to lie for Bruce. Some of them probably wanted to because they're closely aligned with him, but some of the people that lied for Bruce, I feel like, are iffy on him at best. But I don't know if it was like groupthink or just like everyone seems to be going this way, so that's what we're doing, or maybe people just don't like Couture. I haven't necessarily picked up that anyone specifically doesn't like her other than Bruce for obvious reasons. But they all cover for Bruce, and they're just like, oh, we're just chilling. I think it's gonna rain. And they just kind of like, I don't know, they played off really well. I don't think Couture knew anything was up. And then Jake comes up with this plan out of nowhere to be like, oh, I lost one of the rings off my necklace. So he is like, it must have fallen in the sand. And he starts digging, which is, honestly, it was pretty smooth. It wasn't like the smoothest lie, but he got away with it, or at least he seemed to have. He was even able to sneak some winks off to Caleb and Bruce to kind of let them know, hey, don't like worry about my ring for real. I'm just doing this to look. And so he starts looking. He doesn't end up finding it. But I did think that was like a pretty smooth play. And again, one of those instances where someone has a really clever idea and they do it real quick without thinking. And I think it might unintentionally display how hard of a game player they are, maybe a little earlier than they wanted to. Or maybe in a way they weren't fully thinking of because it just happened so fast. Probably pretty easy to happen, but that's the way it went. I'm gonna move my Nick gum to the top because I remember last video I kept watching it in my mouth at the bottom, and I was like, ugh, why? I don't like that. I'm just staring at my Nick gum. That being said, I'd rather see like Nick gum in my mouth during a video than like continue smoking because I've been trying to quit for so long. So it is what it is. While Jake's kind of digging around, or a little after he gives up, I'm not sure which, a boat shows up and it lets them know that they got to drop their buffs. They're heading to the Reba Beach and it's time for the merge. So Bruce obviously starts freaking out because he doesn't have a vote unless he gets this idol. And this idol, it has to be this idol on this island that they are now leaving. So he does like a frantic dig in the last few minutes, and he actually finds the idol. And on the way out, he tells Caleb and Jake that he found the idol. So now Bruce has got the idol. Bruce has his vote. Caleb and Jake and Bruce are the only three, I believe, that know about this idol. Moving on to the merge now. So the tribes all arrive at Reba Beach, and Kendra breaks down at the mere idea of eating fish, which I think really communicates just how hungry some of these people are and how long it's been since they've had anything other than rice or papaya, whatever they're managing to get on the island. And also, as a side note, I dream of being able to process my emotions that efficiently. Like seeing her just like see fish, feel a range of emotions, and just, cry a little and then kind of move on. I was like, wow, that looks efficient. Like that just looks so, I don't know. I wish I could do that. Bruce, true to form as ever, pretty much instantly starts ordering people around that, if rain comes in, they're all getting rained on. The shelter's no good. They got to get working on a shelter. And this was an interesting moment for a few reasons. One, we never followed back up on this, on like a shelter building process or what the shelter situation is. But two, to me, since they moved to Reba Beach, I was a little confused how this wasn't low key Bruce just being like, your guys's shelter is trash and I'm going to fix it because it appears you're too incompetent to have built it. The only way I see that not being the case is if like the shelter was objectively too small for 13 people or 12 people to exist in. And again, no follow-up, wasn't really clear on what the specs were beforehand. Can't really remember necessarily either. And you never get like a clear cut look. So I'm not sure if this was one or the other, but I did think it was an interesting moment that might, I don't know, signal some future tension. We'll see. Kendra then fills Bruce in on the Brando vote and kind of identifies Emily as the spearheader of that plan. So then Kendra and Bruce kind of note that Emily is for sure playing the game pretty hard, and they need to watch her and maybe get her out, which is pretty interesting because Emily also walks up to Bruce now that they're merged on the same beach and tries to like bury the hatchet. You know, she says, I feel like we got off on the wrong foot. You know, I'm definitely in a different space than I was when we started the game. And she tries to like smooth things over, and Bruce decides to poker face her, and he's so far doing like a pretty good job at it. Like he's like, oh, we're definitely cool, don't even worry about it, you seriously don't even need to apologize about anything. And he does a really good job coming off genuine, honestly. But then he says in the aside that like it is all bull, he is gunning for Emily, and that she needs to go as soon as possible. He's definitely on that revenge, you know, he's in his revenge era. And he backs that up when he's talking to Kendra. And I think this is probably going to lead to a situation, because Emily seems so committed to proving previous perceptions of her wrong. I think she might end up walking straight into Bruce's revenge plan, which sucks because Emily is closely aligned with Caleb, and you guys know I'm kind of rooting for Caleb here, but it is what it is. And like if Bruce is smooth enough to like outplay her or like socially schmooze her into a position where she thinks like, oh wow, me and Bruce have really repaired our friendship, and then he like takes her out, then like that's kind of a byproduct of getting distracted by people's perceptions of you as a person as opposed to advancing in the game, which that is one of the things people juggle in Survivor. You know, that's kind of the whole thing, you know, reconciling the parts of this game that involve lying and betraying real people that you genuinely forge connections with and care about, versus simply sticking to your initial goal of making it to the end and getting that $1 million. It's a lot easier to say by any means necessary, or I'll do what I have to, before you do anything or before you're on the beach. But the longer you're there and the more you've done, the harder and more complicated it seems to get for people. And that makes perfect sense to me. Going back to Austin, this was weird, and this seems like it's not going to work out to me. Austin really, really, really wants revenge, specifically against Jay and Kelly, because they chose the ambulance instead of the sandwiches, and he wanted the sandwiches. Which again, I feel like emphasizes how hungry these people are. This dude is like, he's so adamant about getting revenge for these sandwiches, and he seems to be targeting Jay specifically. I think he sees Kelly, like he feels like Kelly was kind of put in the middle and she just had to go one way or the other. He puts most of the blame on Jay, it seems. He is so adamant about getting Jay out for taking this sandwich from him that he's like willing to blindly go after her and possibly blow up his whole game, which we've seen before when someone gets so tied on a little thing, a petty little thing, or revenge, and they don't do the revenge smartly. They don't do like a Bruce where they're, you know, oh, it's fine, and capable of holding it off like, oh yeah, it's cool. We can work together in moments briefly for a time, but there will come a time when I'm coming to get you. I think that's the way that usually works in Survivor. So that's why I think Austin's going to trip up on this, because he's too focused, too vocal, and just very this or nothing for me. And it's all about sandwiches. So hungry. These people are so hungry that just he feels personally wronged. I can't stress that enough. He feels personally wronged because he was forced to choose an advantage, which I also agree. I mean, I would have made the sandwich choice, but like, I don't know. I didn't see this coming, and it seems a little weird to me, and definitely like it's gonna mess up his gameplay, possibly even his entire game. Ultimately, though, they decide to target Jay first because they don't trust her more. Him and the two people he's talking to, I can't remember who it is. I think Kendra's one of them. And they also it's Kendra and Drew, I believe, actually. And Drew in this moment talks about how he is, you know, he does not want to like socialize or get to know anyone really on this new tribe. He's super hyper focused on the next stage of the game. He seems to be leaning really far into the in-group right now. Like he's very much in the in-group mentality. Us versus them. We have now arrived at the point where it is truly us versus them in his mind. And I don't know. I just saw this as consistency within Drew. Consistency of that removed cold calculated gameplay. And I don't think it's a problem when he has someone social like Austin to balance him out. However, Austin was more focused on targeting Jay this episode than he was socializing. So I don't know that that balanced out very well. I think it ended up being fine for those two anyway, because too much else ended up going on for anyone to be looking at them at the moment. But too many situations like this where they are both not participating in, you know, camp life, and I think they could be easily identified as like the duo that they are. I think it risks their game a little, as they kind of like, you can't go too in group because you end up ostracizing, and if you ostracize, the opportunity for people to swing or unite against you without you even knowing definitely goes up. So I don't know. I no longer know how they're gonna play. They might turtle shell up too much and end up, you know, kind of like I was saying with Drew last episode, they might end up cutting off all potential new routes and potential new allies before they even get a chance, because they're so focused on their first plan that they end up not even being able to execute it because they don't get far enough to do it. And that's kind of the thing. Sometimes you have to, you know, Survivor's a very live reaction game. There's like, it's not just identify route, take route forward. It's, you know, identify route you would like to take and then maneuver accordingly and react accordingly to the journey that you are on as you're on it, to ideally get as close to that initial outcome as you want. Or you might even end up having to pick a new route, pick a new outcome halfway through because of options being eliminated. Like, you have to be very fluid, you know, like water. You have to be like water. You cannot just say, this is what I'm going to do and this is what I'm going to do. Like, it reminds me of, what was it, Rich? Was it Rich in like season 1 or 2 who was like, I'm going to vote in alphabetical order? Like, it's like that kind of level of gameplay where it's like, if you play such a rigid, unmoving, unbending, vocal, predictable game like that, I don't know, like, you're just not going to be taken seriously as a player, and you'll probably be led to an easy vote out at some point. Much like him, the doctor. Was it Rich? I don't know anymore. But I think people will probably know who I'm talking about. Emily and Caleb get together again, and they kind of solidify that they are definitely in a duo, and they're definitely working together, and they definitely got each other's backs, which makes me pretty happy, because I think this could work depending on their collective visibility within the merged tribe. Emily's got some insight on you know, Drew and Austin and that side of things, and Caleb's got an insight on Bruce, Katura, and that side of things. So I think they're in a good position to end up being in the middle swing voters for the other two to kind of fight for power in the merge. And sometimes one, if not both of those people, can end up going far if they're not eliminated quick enough. It all depends on if their collective visibility is going to be enough to save each other, and actually act on saving each other, and if they can successfully pit the other two tribes against each other, and then when the time is right, leverage the internal cracks within each to get them to kind of cannibalize themselves, as opposed to just the easy 2 votes, which could happen at any moment. And as soon as they get rid of one, they're probably going to get rid of the other, because once you get rid of one, there's usually one tribe that's kind of responsible, which forces the other one more often than not to side with the other one, because, oh, well, they took out my biggest ally, so I'm against them. So typically when they get rid of one, I feel like they get rid of the other, because it's like boop, boop, and then it's just the 2 tribes, which I hope doesn't happen. It's more interesting with 3. It is, but I also get it. Caleb at this point also seems to be playing really, really hard and kind of more aggressively openly. I think it's something a lot of players tend to do at the merge, because there's this level of, I've made it, now the game begins. And I still feel like during the merge, at least the first couple of days, you don't want to stick your head up too high, because you will be an easy pickoff for the tribe, kind of the new tribe to kind of unify behind. So I worry about him a little. I think he might be playing a little loud and proud, and it could end up biting him. I guess we'll see moving forward. I really hope that doesn't happen, because I do kind of want him to win, and he's becoming the ultimate underdog slowly. But we'll see. And when I say Caleb is playing pretty hard, what I mean is like he starts going around to everyone, talking to everyone, and really just kind of, you know, this is his gameplay is social schmoozing. So he starts to really shine. And one person particularly notices this and doesn't like it. Bruce starts to notice that no one's really talking to him anymore. And as someone who's not being talked to and just kind of walking around doing things, he might be working on that shelter he brought up earlier. I'm not sure. He sees and notices Caleb is talking to everyone, and kind of like he sees him going on these, you know, one-on-ones with other people, or, you know, little small clusters going off and talking about things. And he identifies Caleb as a, you know, true strategic threat in this moment. So he goes to the rest of Lulu and is like, Caleb's got to go. He's talking to everyone. No one should be talking to anyone that's not former Lulu. This is egregious and we gotta get rid of it. But at the same time, he's also just complaining about how no one's talking to him. And to me, this just seems like someone who was used to being in a leadership position feels like that's slipping away in the moment, and they just kind of end up tantruming and picking a person to be mad at about it, someone they think personally wronged them or took it out of their hands. And much like Austin with the, we got to get Jay out because she took away my sandwich, Bruce is going, we got to get Caleb out because he took away my leadership. To such an extent that like Bruce can't even just stick with just telling former Lulu, we got to get Caleb. He ends up confronting Caleb and kind of like coming at him pretty hard, you know, being like, you're talking to everyone and no one's talking to me. Why is no one talking to me? Which is crazy. He even has like this sort of tone like you're not letting me be leader, I should be leader. And again, this, I don't know, this just seems like, I don't know, I think it might just be an age gap thing, where Bruce and his generation just have this expectation that like you need to respect, you know, the fact that I was previously the leader. It should be assumed that I'm the leader going forward in all ways. And not only that, but people are not playing this game the way I wanted it to be played. The way I wanted it to be played was all the Lulus would never talk to anyone that was non-Lulu ever again, merge or not. And people who aren't doing that need to conform to my gameplay style, or they need to go. And oftentimes that's a player's downfall. Like you do not control any of these other players, and all of these other players are real humans. They're people. They have their own motives, their own thoughts, their own perceptions, and their own plans. And they are going to play this game in a way that makes sense to them based off of that information that they have. And so just this expectation that everyone needs to do it one way, it's ruined seasons before, where like everyone ends up on the same page, and it's such an established game that it kind of like, I don't know, it's just a little more boring to watch. But two, it's just how people lose control, sometimes even end up quitting because like, oh, this game's not going my way, there's no way I can win. They just refuse to adapt and they just leave, or they just, you know, make themselves an easy vote out. And I don't know, part of me is worried that might be what Bruce is about to do. And even though I'm not particularly fond of Bruce, it's lame to see someone go out that way. And it's a little shocking to see someone still have this sort of mentality in season 45. Now that everyone's all merged and happy, it's about time that we get them, you know, pitted against each other in the producer's eyes. So we move on to the challenge right away. And like most challenges, if not all challenges this season, it is a double reward slash, you know, tribal challenge, which I kind of missed the two challenges, I'll be honest. There was more time to enjoy the rewards, and kind of you saw a little more socialization, especially during the rewards. It seems like they have, because we got 90-minute episodes, and because one of the main complaints was like more camp life, part of that deal was letting go of two challenges per episode, which I don't know. I think it can work. I'm just in the adjustment period right now where I'm getting used to the fact that there's only one challenge. And maybe that's something that's been going on for a while that I just really haven't paid attention to or noticed until now that I'm actually like taking notes during episodes and paying very close attention. But yeah, that's just kind of how I feel about that real quick. This challenge was really wild and insane. Honestly, one of the more elaborate challenges I can remember in a while. I feel like this is one of those challenges where in the room they were just like, and then they do this. Oh, and what if they did this after that? Oh, and then also they could do this. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Like this challenge is insane. There's no way it didn't just tucker everyone out. First, you have these big heavy nets just laying over a mud pit that goes on like, I don't know, a pretty lengthy distance, and people have to just belly crawl straight through it, get through the heavy net and the mud, and push through it one by one by one. And it's going to be 2 tribes of 6. I didn't say that yet, but that's important. So they get through the net. After they get through the net, they get to a cart, and there's like several stations next to the cart. It's already assembled, where they have these big heavy sandbags that they have to collect into the cart and push further down the next little stretch to this tower, where they stack all the sandbags into a ladder / mound of some kind so they can climb that tower. Once they get to the top of that tower, they get some keys. Once they get some keys, they jump off that into a rope slide, which anytime people have had to jump in nettings or ropes in Survivor, they always get hurt. They get hurt. They're kneeing themselves in the face. They're landing on their arms weird. Their ankles are bending weird. It happens every time, and it happens this time. I only bring that up because, I don't know, it just seems weird to me that we're still doing this when people are routinely getting hurt. And only a little hurt, sure, but like, people consistently get a little hurt, land a little wrong, you know, in that situation. To me, it just seems like one of these days it's going to go really wrong. Every time I like cringe when people like land, like you see heads just make full on contact with their knees, or they kick themselves in the face. I don't know. It makes me nervous every time, and this time was no different. After they go down the rope slide of death, they have to form a human ladder or find some way as a group to climb over this giant boulder, which just gets them up another little tower. And they have 2 people use the keys to unlock puzzle pieces to the first puzzle, because there's 2 puzzles. So they do a first puzzle, which gives them a riddle / key or legend that they have to use to decode / unscramble the second puzzle, which a different 2 people will do. And they have to come up with the phrase, or figure out what the phrase is, which is safely moving forward tonight, signifying that the tribe that wins this will be safe from tribal council. Now onto the rewards section of this challenge. First place, safe from tribal council. They get to vote, but they are immune at tribal council. They get the merge meal. Only the winners get the merge meal, which is pretty wild. Usually they reward everyone who hits the merge with a meal. I thought that was kind of lame that they no longer gave everyone a meal, because I thought that was always kind of a crucial thing. Halfway through, you know, you're hitting the big stretch. People should get a meal, I think. I don't know. It even makes the game more interesting. I feel like it makes the tribal, or not the tribals, the challenges a little more interesting, at least for a couple days while people got some gas in the tank, but whatever. We'll see that it doesn't create an imbalance. Well, actually, I guess it might not, because the teams can always split differently. But aside from that, they get their merge buffs, because you don't get your merge buff if you lose. You have to go to tribal council, where someone will go home, and then the remaining people will get their merge buffs. There is also an odd number of players. There's 13 people, and it's 2 groups of 6. So one person draws, you know, they all draw for rocks to see on who's what team, and whoever draws the rock with no color does not play and must pick a tribe to win or lose with, something we've seen before. People feel different ways about this. Some people think it's really lame. Some people, you know, think it's, you know, like cheap, and like it gives a person an easy way out. You know, it is up to Survivor gods on who pulls the no color rock. So I don't know. I don't really know how else they would get through a situation where they have an odd number of people. I'm fine enough with it, if that makes sense. On red team, we had Caleb, Jay, Jake, D, and Emily. And on blue team, we had Sifu, Drew, Bruce, Austin, Julie, and Kendra. Off the rip, blue looks like a much more physically capable tribe, and it's definitely called out. But the challenge is pretty heavy in both puzzle and physical elements, so still more or less could go either way. Katura is the one who draws the no color rock, and so she has to pick who she goes with. She ultimately ends up going with blue, Bruce's tribe, interestingly. I think just based purely off the physical aspect of it and all the sandbags and the climbing and stuff. That was the bet she made. going into the challenge now. The first section, the mud net, we start out with the pairings of Caleb and Sifu. So Caleb from red team and Sifu from blue team. Sifu has a little bit of a lead, gets it done first, and then Jake and Austin come in. Austin maintains that little lead for the blue team, and then Bruce comes in, and at this point the lead is like halfway through the rope. He gets done with the rope when there's still about half of the way to go for D. And that pattern sort of holds through. They're about halfway through until it's Jay and Kendra, the second to last people to go. Kendra's on blue and Jay is on red. Jay gets a little over halfway through the net. So at this point, Kendra's already finished because their lead was a little over halfway at this point. So Kendra finishes. Jay's still working her way through when Julie starts for blue team, final person to go, and she just gets stuck. The weight of the net, the deepness of the mud, I'm not sure what it is, but she noticeably starts struggling, and they lose a lot of time here, so much so that Julie laps them, and they kind of don't recover from here. Honestly, like, this is another challenge where it more or less ended up kind of feeling like a blowout. And again, seasons are a lot less interesting, at least challenge-wise, which is a big part of every season, when it's just consistently such a blowout. Not that this one was entirely seen coming, and it was pretty random the way the tribes got split up, but I don't know. It's just another instance of it in this season. Moving on to the key climb now. Blue gets their keys before red even gets to the last sandbag station. They're still like pushing the cart, so the lead is pretty serious. So then, you know, people jump down the rope bridge. A couple people have some close calls. I think Sifu actually did all right. He somehow magically did it. He nailed it even. But yeah, they jump down, they start climbing their boulder to get over it. And at this point, it's looking like that setback with Jay is really just killed the red team here. It's not impossible for them to have a comeback, given that there are two puzzles, and they are new puzzles, and they seem not super easy, but you know, it's hard when you're hungry. So they're starting the puzzle, but the other team is, you know, still working on stacking their sandbags at this point. First puzzle on blue team, we had Austin and Drew. Not a surprising pairing there. And they're starting the puzzle as red is you know, doing the rope slide, and a couple people need their heads and had some close calls. I think Jake had like something happen with his ankle. It just makes me nervous every time. I don't know why. It's always been a particular like wincer for me, but it makes me very nervous. While Austin and Drew are doing the first leg of it, red does manage to catch up, and Jake and Kelly start working on their first section of the puzzle. By the time Austin and Drew finish their puzzle, I would say Jake and Kelly are like a fourth or a third of the way through the first puzzle, maybe halfway, somewhere around there, but not incredible progress. But they're still lagging behind, but they closed the gap a teensy bit. For the second puzzle, Blue had Kendra and Julie working on it, and they got it done pretty quickly. At one point, Drew kind of realized that the first word was safely, based off of the imagery. It was like a safe plus a leaf plus Y. He puts it all together. Not really sure how. It was pretty clever. I don't know that I would have gotten it that quick. And especially, I can't stress again, hungry, starving, exhausted. It does not make for good thinking, or especially abstract thinking. But he pulled it off. And pretty quickly, too. He kind of like threw them that bone. I don't know if that's what did it, but shortly after he was like, hey, I think the first word safely, they just boom, got it. And they got it before red team even finished their first section. They still had like a third of it left, maybe. Yeah, a third or a fourth of it left by the time they finished. So it was another kind of blowout. And so we now have who's going to tribal. Couture did pick correctly. Blue team did win, so she gets to enjoy the meal and the safety of tribal and the buff early with them. So good call on her part. The next thing we see is the merge meal. Everyone's kind of chilling and, you know, just eating and enjoying themselves. Drew pretty aptly calls out, you know, he is like, I will say the guy is smart. He's smart. I just don't know about the whole smartest player to ever play Survivor ever thing. And I think the ego could stand to be knocked down a couple notches, but he very smartly realizes that, you know, typically the merge meal is a time, or eating in general, I find, eating together in a group is a time where people feel camaraderie. Eating together, I feel like, is a natural way that honestly mammals build camaraderie. You eat with people you trust to not steal your food. And eating together is oftentimes a familial thing, you know, like eating around the dinner table or whatever. So it kind of promotes those feel good socially feelings oftentimes, at least in the right environment. And Survivor historically has proven to be one of those environments. So people are feeling very friendly. They're just kind of talking, whatever. Their guards are down. So he's kind of using it as a chance to try and get more information. And I would say it definitely ends up working, even though he doesn't specifically call it out. Because shortly after he kind of has that aside with the camera, Sifu's like, all right, let's talk game. And he talks about how he wants to get Jay out because she voted for him, which she didn't. D did, but she lied about that to Sifu because she thought that would be a good idea, and D of course is going to let her because D's game so far has been betray everyone on my alliance until there's no alliance left. So like that's where that goes. Drew agrees with Sifu that Jay needs to go and that she's a hard player, which I didn't necessarily see coming, but I guess that's where his mind's at. Like right after that, Julie comes out and she's like, I think we need to get Caleb because Caleb is playing really hard. He's a very social player. He's like one of the bigger threats. Kendra tentatively agrees with that for a moment, and then Bruce pushes for Caleb, and that seems to like pull Kendra in more. Once two people have kind of said like, I think it is Caleb, she's like, okay, yeah, maybe Caleb is the one to go. Katura points out that Emily and consequently Caleb are really good as swing votes right now and could easily be leveraged to kind of help them gain more control in the game, especially, you know, against the other sizable tribe that makes up this new merge tribe. And she gets shut down pretty heavily. They're all kind of like, no, Caleb's got to go. This isn't going to work. We don't want to work with them. You know, kind of Bruce's whole not Lulu, not talking thing. So that's kind of where the winners end up in terms of plotting during the meal. After that, we take a look at the beach where we have the red tribe doing their little scramble as they figure out who they're going to get rid of. Jay pulls Jake aside and pitches Caleb, if not Emily, to get out because she thinks they are the two easiest votes and that Caleb is really powerful and Emily's in his pocket and also kind of a swing voter, so a little less predictable. So they need to go first. Definitely an understandable argument. But Jake kind of likes Caleb, so he's not super into this idea right off the bat. He's a little more interested in hearing out some other options. So then D, who again last episode was talking about probably getting rid of Jay since that would be easiest for her game, especially since Jay is one of the few people that knows that D is definitely the one who voted for Sifu, and that could blow up her game, or at least her spot with Sifu at the moment, and get him targeting her. So D, unsurprisingly, talks to Jake about getting rid of Jay again, and Jake seems a lot more open to this, especially because he kind of likes Caleb and wants to get Caleb, and Jay just told him that, you know, we got to get rid of Caleb. So it ends up working for him that like, yeah, that seems like the move. D then talks to Caleb about Jay, because so far that's just kind of what she does. She just betrays people, and I'm not like saying that in like a throw shade way. It's just like a matter of fact. Like at every fork in the road, she has turned to burn someone that she has been working with, like some member of her alliance. It's reminiscent of that Sandra any name but mine, but the difference was Sandra didn't like really buddy up to anyone or like preach like I'm in an alliance. She would literally just be like, I'll vote whoever. Like she was pretty clear it was just a vote. It's just a difference in gameplays, that's all I'm saying. And I don't know, it because of what she has said in the past about, you know, honor and integrity or respect in the game, I just can't help but point it out. It makes me laugh a little. Jake then tells Kelly about the betrayal against Jay, which Kelly loves hearing because she's got an amulet and that's really good for her amulet. So she's like, okay, yeah, definitely open to that idea, which makes sense because again, I feel like the people with amulets have more incentive to get each other out than work together, and that's kind of what's happening. After this, the blue tribe and red tribe kind of come together, and there's like a little summit between some of the members of both, and this ends up devolving quickly. I think it was Katura, Kelly, and Kendra who ended up meeting, and this kind of disseminated into like a bunch of split offs, and the classic pre-tribal scramble where everyone's just going insane. Katura voices that the winners want Jay or Caleb out for sure, which is more or less where the red team has landed too. Kelly says like, I definitely think Jay. Let's get Jay because Amulet makes sense. Perfect. Kendra pushes for Caleb again because at this point she's kind of fully backing Bruce and in his pocket, which is pretty smart for her, honestly, because Bruce is a much louder person and larger target in terms of who are people looking at in the game. So I think that's like pretty smart on Kendra's part in terms of like lying a little lower and getting a little further into the merge situation before she starts maybe playing a little louder. After this, Couture like ends up talking to Bruce. I'm not really sure what sparked this or why she did this. It seemed like a little reckless to me, but she like tells Bruce straight up, I am not voting for Caleb. I am voting for Jay. And obviously Bruce doesn't like that. Bruce hasn't really liked Couture. Couture hasn't really liked Bruce this entire time. It's just like one of those moments where I think like they just don't, their personalities just don't mix well. So like he or she or whatever started it, they just can't help but like verbally disagree with each other out loud. It just, to me, it seemed like an unnecessary, providing an unnecessary opportunity for the plan to change. So like, yeah, she just straight up tells Bruce, I'm not voting with your plan. I don't like your plan. And then Austin and Drew make the mistake of telling Emily, who they think is with them, that the plan is currently to get out Caleb, which puts Emily obviously in a weird position because she's just kind of reaffirmed with Caleb that she's going with him till the end, or at least that's the implication, while also, having an ear to the ground over here. And now she's got this. She tries to pitch that Caleb could be a really strong ally as a swing vote, especially if they save him, because he'll be forever grateful. Something she would definitely know about as someone who's been saved actually by Caleb and then became extremely grateful. Weirdly, they tell her this is not how Survivor works. And she's like, this is exactly how Survivor works. And no one listens to her. But I mean, in her experience, this is exactly how Survivor works. That's what she did, and it worked best for her game. Because she's not really feeling heard over there, and maybe also because she had already promised herself to Caleb, hard to say which, she lets Caleb know that, they're coming for you. They're coming for you hard. And, Caleb's like, okay, well, I know Bruce has that idol. And I know that my best bet at this point is to work with Austin or Drew, because Bruce does not like me. He straight up told me, you can't be the leader. You're stealing the leader from me, and like dressed me down like a disobedient child earlier. So he goes to Austin and Drew and is like, Bruce has got an idol. Let's get out Jay. This is how you know you can't trust Bruce. This is how you know you can trust me. And they definitely seem like they're on board with getting out Jay. So at this point, it seems like things have flopped again, classically, and the target might be Jay. Finally, we get to tribal. And if this wasn't one of the best tribals I've seen in a while, then I don't even know. I'm not saying it was actually a great tribal in terms of all-encompassing Survivor. It's been a while since I watched a lot of seasons, so I don't know that I can say that. But I know this was one of the ones I've been more excited during than a while. And it starts out pretty straight up heavy. One thing I want to say before I really jump into the meat and potatoes of it is like Jeff starts out, saying like, Emily and Bruce, how are you guys getting along? What's going on there? And Bruce's poker face for Emily is crazy. This dude, he's like fist pounding her. He seems genuinely happy, smiling. Like, this guy's got social moves straight up, which is weird because he's made a lot of social blunders. But like when he is focused and has a goal and is like really turning it on, he can. Which makes some of the other mistakes really interesting. But I do think he's playing that like expert level. I think Emily's going to fall for it at this point. I really think she's going to walk straight into it. Maybe not. Maybe her commitment to Caleb will save her from that. But it's very possible in my mind that Bruce is the undoing of Emily. Another thing I noticed about this tribal is Caleb was pretty vocal about him and Emily's alliance, which I know it's kind of like a well-known thing and probably an assumed thing since they were on the same tribe together originally. But again, the thing with Caleb is I think he makes it further. The quieter his game is, the safer he plays. And he's been really turning the dial up this episode. And I feel like it certainly got him noticed on a couple of fronts. It's just kind of the way it goes. And so this is another one of those instances where I feel like you're giving away too much too early, or you might be indicating where things are going before it goes that way, which could end up changing the way it goes, Then things start to get pretty insane. It's pretty clear that the vote is between Caleb and someone this tribal, and it gets to a point where Caleb is like, okay, let me just say this before we go any further. I think people should be looking at Jay. I'm going to be voting for Jay. And he just directly says it in tribal. This, of course, sets off a bomb. Jay's like, interesting. And he goes, you know, I know people, Caleb specifically says, I know people see me as a strategic and a physical threat, but I think they really need to be, or not a strategic. He says physical and social threat, but I don't think I'm the biggest strategic threat in this game. And I think people need to be looking at Jay. Jay very smartly says, I would like to hear more about how you are the biggest social and physical threat, which is really, really smart. And she then also rightly points out that Caleb doing this kind of also highlights how much of a strategic threat he is. Like that was a very good play in a lot of ways to just directly say it and make that pitch right before the vote. This kind of sets off a whole bomb. He points out how Jay is in this alliance with Dee and Julie. And this sets Dee off, which again, I just can't stand. It makes me rich, or it just seems so rich coming from me, because like Jay and Dee clearly took this personally. Jay, I understand. Your name got thrown out there. He's specifically saying he's voting for you. Kind of hard not to get emotional when $1 million on the line. And I feel like handled it better than Dee. Dee started just jumping down Caleb's throat, you know, saying all these things, and like clearly was like very mad at him specifically, and you know, saying like, why don't you name some other threats? And he was like, nah, I'm comfortable with what I said. And she starts, you know, saying that like this is someone you can't trust, because how could she possibly trust him when he just said he's gonna that she's a threat and that he's gonna vote for her alliance member. He rightfully points out, to be fair, you're about to vote for me. So you're now in the same position I'm in, if anything. And she didn't like that answer, because that was just a mirror being held up to her. And even more so, she is just like taking this backstabbing so personally, what she views as a backstabbing so personally. And given that her entire gameplay thus far has been backstabbing members of her alliance, I don't get it. Like it's to me, it's giving, it's just a game unless you fuck me over. And if you screw me over or vote me out, it stops being a game. It's very personal, and you're a bad person. Like only a bad person would get rid of me or stand against me, but good people align with me. And I don't like that. I don't like that in Survivor. I don't like when people try and moralize people based off of where they ended up in the game. I used to be one of those players when I was much younger, but given how financially desperate some people are in this country, and given the fact that this is ultimately a game for a life-changing amount of money, even though $1 million doesn't go nearly as far as it used to, and it's actually closer to $500,000 after taxes, I think it's hard, very hard, unless the situation is extreme, to even pull a moral assessment on a person solely based off their Survivor game. Without additional context from their personal life, it's impossible, even, I'd say. And that's kind of what makes Survivor so interesting. Like, it obviously informs some of their morality, but I don't think you could ever write, like, someone could align with not great people because not great people dominate the season, but they're ultimately good people, but they also ultimately did all of that just because they need money for their family. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's not to say like the ends justify the means, because usually they don't, but I don't know. It's a conversation that can easily be had. And I think it's kind of basic and reductionist when people just break someone down to, if you're against me, you are a bad person. Like, oh, well, wouldn't it be so convenient, you know, if that's the way it broke down? But really, that's not how it works. So we get to the vote. Everyone votes. We know Austin's not voting because he wants his idol to last longer. For some reason, I think Jay and Kelly don't have to sacrifice their vote. I feel like I missed something there, because they're not talking about sacrificing their votes, and they're not sacrificing their votes at all, unless Austin is using a different idol. I can't remember anymore, if I'm being real, because didn't Austin have 2 idols at one point? I might be remembering that wrong, but he sacrificed his vote. So we have let's see, there's 13 people. They're all voting, so we're down to 12 votes. And they go in to vote. Caleb yells Jay's name as he walks back, which is a move. D looks absolutely furious. I don't know if it's about the previous conversation just before the vote, if it's about him saying Jay in kind of like an arrogant or shitty-ish way, tongue-in-cheek way. Could be either. Jay is just kind of like sitting there thinking very clearly, and then she kind of says back in a joking way, you know, Caleb. So I feel like she took it pretty well, honestly. Granted, she was probably really in her head at this point, but still, again, I just can't help but point out the person who is literally on the chopping block for the sake of D, because she's the one who lied to Sifu and kind of started a lot of the rally against her about voting for him when she didn't. So like, she handled this better than D did, which is just interesting to me. Caleb, right before the votes are read, decides to play his shot in the dark, meaning he didn't vote, meaning there's only 11 people voting. So there's 11 voters. Caleb plays a shot in the dark. He ends up being safe, which I feel like almost never happens. I naturally was super ecstatic because I'm a Caleb supporter, but it was also one of those moments where like, this is so clutch. This is so, it's, I don't know, they almost for certain production didn't stage this safe. Like, they didn't like swap out the paper or anything. I don't even know that they've ever done that. Technically they're allowed to, though. Something a lot of people don't realize, part of the contract for Survivor, the producers in Jeff Probst, CBS, they are allowed to change the rules of the game or break any rules of the game from a production side at any given moment, and it's valid. Part of the contract says that they can do that. So honestly, if they wanted to say, hey Caleb, this is a not safe advantage, we're going to give you a safe one because it makes for better TV, they could and would do that off camera and not tell us. Like that's something that could in theory happen. I don't know that they've ever done something like that before, but it's just to say this was one of those moments where I was like, man, sometimes it's just too perfect, but that's also how life is sometimes. It's random, it's RNG, and there's only a 50-50. But Caleb's safe, and he played it at the exact right time because Jeff reads all the votes. Jeff reads all the votes after the explosion goes off where Caleb is safe. Jay realizes she's like totally screwed and just looks absolutely distraught. My heart actually kind of goes out to her in that moment because I can't imagine the heart-sink feeling there. The definition of a rug pull. D looks floored, like shocked and floored, which kind of makes sense given everything that just went into this. And then Jeff reads the vote, and all 11 votes were for Caleb. Every single last vote, which is weird. It means Emily voted against Caleb. So Emily doesn't care about Caleb. And I feel like Caleb was super stoked the whole time, obviously, because he saved himself and this was a really clutch moment. But I wonder if he took note of the fact that everyone who said that they would work with him didn't. This was an indicator that he has no allies. He is playing too loud, and they are gunning for him, all of them. So I feel like I was kind of right and definitely a little vindicated there. But yeah, every single vote is against Caleb, so they have to re-vote now. Caleb doesn't get to vote because his shot in the dark is still in effect. No other advantages, or at least shot in the darks, can be played on the re-vote. So they go into the re-vote. At this point, or just before the revote, actually, there's a breakup of whispers because Jeff's like, I'm sure you guys have to figure it out. So everyone splits off into literal clusters, and then, just running around whispering to different people, different groups. Things seem to be leaning Jay, but it's clearly between Jay and Emily. I hope Emily sees this as the indicator that, like, hey, once they get rid of Caleb, you're next. Because like I said, oftentimes you gotta kind of do that because the person's gonna feel scorned, and scorned people can sometimes make big moves, especially if they're slow and quiet and patient. And Emily is definitely one of those people, I think. She was patient enough to rebuild her kind of reputation with her tribe, like she has definitely stood the test. It's between Jay and Emily. That much is clear at this point. Everyone votes. We get the votes. We only get to hear 7 of the votes. There was 1 vote for Emily, 6 votes for Jay. Jay goes home. Buffs are handed out to the rest of the team. I mean, what can you say? I knew it was going to be Jay or Caleb. Like halfway through the episode, that was pretty clear, especially with how much people were targeting Caleb and how much louder his gameplay has gotten. I was really shocked that Caleb was able to pull it off. I can't believe he was safe. If he wasn't safe, he would have been so going home. It would have been a pretty understandable ending to the episode, just given how things gone. I would have been disappointed still, but it would have made sense. I'm shocked that every single person voted for Caleb for sure, especially Emily, who had just kind of committed to him that I'm definitely with you no matter what. She clearly, you know, in her accountant-like nature, went with the numbers, went with the rational decision, and now it might bite her in the ass. I don't know. Caleb is pretty forgiving, and she is his only ally, or closest thing too. So it could go either way. But yeah, kind of shifting into the conclusion side of things here. Couture being on the outs with Lulu for the most part, and definitely Bruce. And Bruce does still kind of seem to be leading the Lulu tribe around, if even from a backseat position at this point, because he got everyone to turn against Caleb. I think that might push Couture into more of a middle/swing vote position, if not next episode, like not too far down the line. I think she's like slowly getting pushed that way, and she's been trying to take aim at Bruce for a long time and hasn't had the people within her own tribe to do so. Now she can find those people, I think. That's one direction I see the game going. D, unsurprisingly, and just like she said an episode or two ago, totally let Jay take the fall for her regarding the Sifu vote and just like being the loud one in terms of targeting, which was really smart on D's end. And I would applaud it a lot more if she didn't make that dumbass comment about, you know, losing respect for people for not playing honorably or fairly when, you know, her biggest thing this whole time has been like fucking over her alliance, especially because like she always preaches, we got to stick to the alliance, you know, get this person out because they're a threat to the alliance. But then when push comes to shove, it's usually a member of her alliance that she ends up targeting. I don't know, make it make sense to me. And also, how long before people notice that? I don't know. But she's making it pretty far, and sometimes that person wins the game just because they're somehow better at pulling one over on everyone before they can on them. So I at the same time wouldn't be surprised if D makes it pretty far, as that person has in the past before. Ultimately, yeah, this was one of the greatest tribals I feel like I've seen in a while, and I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being one of the better tribals of this season, because a lot happened. The being safe was just such an epic moment. And just to kind of like go back to the beginning of it, I understand how the adrenaline rush and the threat of being removed from the game and losing your ability to win money can make you, in the heat of the moment, take some things personally. But I don't know, seeing someone who is doing that in a way that involves a decent amount of blatant hypocrisy or moral grandstanding really irks me. Just specifically with that D situation, like the audacity to take things so personally when you are personally screwing over people that were in your alliance, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand how you can criticize, you know, one person for playing a dirty game when you're also arguably playing what is literally the definition of a dirty game. It just bugs me. And it makes it very hard for me to like root for a person, because I now want them to lose, because I feel like they're blind to they're just absolutely blind to their wrongdoings or their moves, I guess. I don't know what it is, but for some reason it makes me actively root against people, and that's where I'm at. In terms of Caleb, I think Caleb is probably on the way out. It makes me really sad, but his gameplay got too loud, or is getting too loud. Literally every single person voted for him. And on top of that, he was pretty vocal in celebrating how excited he was that he was safe from the vote. And that's amazing. And I get it. And he has been on the bottom the whole time. So I can imagine how big of a win it was for him and how big it felt. But historically, when people can't shut up about a good move they did or something awesome that happened for them in the game, like rubs people the wrong way and they vote him out. And that totally makes sense to me. I mean, Survivor's a social game, like a very much social game, and a big part of it is having social awareness, and part of that is awareness enough to not rub salt in wounds you might be creating in people. So I don't know. I think Caleb might be on the way out. I think Bruce is also a possibility. for the way out. So that's kind of my bet for next time is Bruce and Caleb. It's going to be between those two. We'll see. But yeah, that really sums up Survivor season 45 episode 6. Let me know if this format works for you guys, where I just kind of do like a full recap of the episode. It does take a while to type up all these notes, get all my thoughts together, and then record it all, but I do enjoy it. I feel like it helps me remember more each week, which is cool. But if you guys feel like it's too long or too much, or I'm going over like every little thing, just go ahead and let me know. It's hard to cut anything out because it all feels so important, and you never know what's going to end up coming back up later. But yeah, thanks again for watching, all my fellow contestants on the island with me here on Survivor. But I will see you guys again next week for the next episode of Survivor 45. And yeah, see you later, Warehouse. Catch you on the flippy flip.